You're listening to The Breakup Theory, conversations about ending things and collective liberation. In today's episode, Caroline and I respond to a listener's letter about breaking up with their psychoanalyst after 5 years. Right now, there is such an emphasis on therapy as a means to address trauma, as well as to adjust to the terror of the current conditions in the world. There's also a whole industry of self-help that coincides with shaming people by individualizing their faults and failures. We may all need therapy to a certain extent, but when do we end it? Breaking up with a therapist is a kind of practice breakup. It's a controlled environment where you can exercise your own determination and decision-making and face the consequences practically and emotionally. As the listener details in their letter, ending things comes with a large dose of ambivalence, and we tend to reason our way through it with pros and cons or assigning blame and guilt. However, as the breakup theory tries to suggest, we can break up for no other reason than it's what we feel is right in the moment. Caroline and I have a far-reaching discussion about all of these ideas and many others, ultimately as a way to support the listener in their decision and their already well-thought-out process of marking this ending. But this conversation should be helpful to any listener, in or out of therapy, as another approach to encountering our feelings about the end and our own attempts at power and control. If you haven't already, please go over to cawshinythings.com and sign up to read the works that the amazing Carla Joy Bergman, Danny Burleson, Vicky Osterweil, and I are sharing there. Things have been incredibly difficult, but hopefully our offerings there can give you some perspective that is helpful and inspiring. I have a column called She's Not There, but I'm also producing other kinds of writing. We have another advice column that Carla and I are doing, and all of us are posting articles, essays, writing prompts, and recordings. There's plenty for you to sink your teeth into. The online journal is currently open to subscribers for free, but will pivot soon to a paid subscription service. Please check it out and help spread the word. As always, if you want to submit a question, scenario, or problem for us to discuss from an anarchist, autonomous, queer perspective of ending things, you can write us at forum.jotform.com/thebreakuptheory/stories or call us at 917-526-6548. We love to hear from you. And if you like this podcast, please share with your friends, rate us, and follow us wherever it is you receive your podcasts. The Breakup Theory is a member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts. CZN will help you discover a library of amazing audio projects, so check them out at channelzeronetwork.com. All right, we're back for what I'm calling the second season of The Breakup Theory, and we're kicking it off, me and Caroline, with another beautiful agony letter. Caroline, will you read it?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Let me pull it up. This is addressed to Shuli, River, and Caroline, even though River's not on this episode. Dear Shuli, River, and Caroline, I'm writing because I'm in the process of ending psychoanalysis. I've been seeing my analyst 4 times a week for 5 years. It feels like the right time to end. My next step needs to be into a space on my own, and I also need to work through going through the process of a separation. I'm finding it hard, but I know it's what I want to do. In my past experiences of leavings, I have tried not to feel either the ending or the relationship itself. Leaving a few days early to skip out on the goodbyes, not letting myself feel anything until the separation has happened, and then breaking down on my own. Convincing myself that the whole relationship was garbage, going scorched earth, and so by some emotional logic, there hasn't really been an ending, right? Because I've persuaded myself that this whole relationship doesn't count somehow. Looking at these experiences with a bit of distance, I think I split endings into 2 options. I don't want it to happen, so I'm being abandoned and feel horrible and the world is ending. Or I do want it to happen, which must mean that the thing that's ending has always been terrible and a bad idea and never had any value. Which, now that I type that out, I guess maybe that means there's only ever one option. I never want an ending. I'm always terrified of separation and abandonment. And when I really need to leave, to make leaving possible, I have to cover up those feelings by persuading myself I never wanted the thing anyway, so there's no loss. Look, Mom, no loss. I haven't had an experience of a separation or an ending that felt okay. Like it was okay that something existed, a relationship, a house share, a friendship, a job, and then it's okay that it's ending too and making way for something else. even when that's been an amicable ending and on paper was okay, I haven't been able to experience it that way. In leaving analysis, it's really hard to remain connected to the truth of how important the analysis experience and my analyst as a person have each been to me, and to the truth that I can choose to end this, and that can be good and about growth. Nothing has gone horribly wrong. Nobody is mad at anybody. Ending is just a thing people can choose to do and need to do, which I know, but I can't quite feel or trust right now. I'm coming to see these things about myself more clearly and trying to work out a new way to do a departure. Kind of feels like swimming through murky water full of seaweed, though. Your podcast is always helpful. Asking to hear your thoughts on the situation is one point of contact I'm reaching for to try and help me through. And also by writing in, I'm showing myself that I can reach out to others for different kinds of help, advice, and understanding beyond my analysis and in all kinds of ways. To boil this down to an actual question, how can I really feel and acknowledge the pain of loss, of ending that I'm choosing, while simultaneously feeling and acknowledging the excitement and sense of growth that comes with this ending? I don't want to hide from either of those things or let either one eclipse the other. I appreciate any thoughts you have about this and all the work you do with the breakup theory. Thanks and solidarity.
Wow, I like this letter.
You too.
I mean, the letter itself is already insightful, but obviously is asking for an outside perspective. Also, it's just like beautiful. So thank you for writing in. Yeah, I mean, there's so much here. So I think we were discussing, we could go paragraph by paragraph. I think there's like two major kinds of questions here. One is specifically about ending psychoanalysis, and the other one is like more generally about endings and then connecting the two things. Where do you think we should start, Caroline?
Upon reading it out loud, I noticed that there's a theme of trust and specifically self trust. How do we trust ourselves to initiate an ending? And how difficult that can be if endings have signaled distress, abandonment, if there have been signals that reach into us and say, like, this ending means that something is wrong. This is really what the whole idea for this podcast was, right? Is like you, Shuli, were really interested in questioning why this over attachment, particularly in like movement spaces, to like not ending things. Like, why is there this pressure to keep a certain organizing functions going, to like keep certain movements going, to keep certain committees going, right?
Well, and
So,
relationships too. Like, I wanted to draw that analogy because we often say that a relationship that ends failed. And actually, you can learn a lot from endings. And it's an experience we all go through inevitably, even if we don't want things to end. Sorry, I interrupted though.
no, it's fine. I actually, you latched. That wasn't an interruption. I've been having this conversation with my partner recently. I'm like, I'm latching. It's just like a linguistic term that means like somebody said something and then you interrupt them to kind of like build on the conversation. But I do interrupt people a lot. Okay, so yeah, and ending relationships, of course. So ending analysis. This has been a long term analysis for this person. They've been in an analysis for years, it sounds like, right?
5 years. 4 times a week, 5 years. That's like a classic
Yeah,
analysis.
it
That's like
is. I've
Freud
never
was like, do it every day for the week. I think take the weekends off. I mean, early on, he like even would have people live in his house, which
I
I think
know.
later was like, maybe that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Um,
Later, all of the different licensing boards would be like, oh, don't do that.
But he has an essay about this early on called Analysis, Terminable and Interminable, where he theorizes the importance of the end of analysis as a structure to the cure. Like that you could go on forever, of course, but if you actually want to like release whatever symptom, and this is like Freud, so it's whatever is in this context, you need to set an ending. And sometimes he's like, it can be arbitrary. You set an ending and he says the structure of the ending itself will kind of produce an effect on the symptom in order to make it like releasable in some way because your unconscious knows that it's coming to time. And like in the Wolfman case, which he wrote up, that's something he did because that case I think kept going on. And I think at some point he like announced it to the Wolfman, like, yeah, so we're going to end at this time, But I think he also acknowledges that that can cause distress for the analyst. Anyway, so I'm bringing it back historically.
No, I'm really glad you're doing that because I was just thinking about the importance of termination in therapeutic relationships and whether that's analysis or another kind of therapeutic relationship. Like, I don't necessarily think that it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to end those relationships. It can be wounding, but this person is ending it, right? Like, this person is coming to their analyst and saying, I'm ready. Like, I feel ready to move on. And it sounds like this person is doing this within the like security and love and care of this relationship, which could be a new experience for them. It sounds like it is a new experience for them to say, I am choosing to end this. This is not being done to me.
Right.
I am enacting this. I have the power. I am consenting to this.
Well, like you said,
And
it's being done in a structure of care and support. So it's like not as dangerous as ending a relationship like with a friend or a lover where you feel losing control or being treated badly in response. Like you can kind of, if you have an analyst, which I'm assuming you like this person somewhat, of course you'll feel ambivalent, but that this person is going to hold you in the structure without like, coming after you or yelling at you or like, right? Like that, this is the place to practice. It's a simulation almost.
right. Yeah, there has to be a place to start the goodbye. And I get the sense that this analyst is probably going to hold that really, really well for this person. And that is a sign of a, quote unquote good analyst is to be able to support and encourage the ending that the analyst is choosing.
Yeah. I think I don't know if I'm making this up because it's my own thought, but I feel like I had a therapist before say like, of course, you could come forever and that's like beneficial for me economically, but ending is important. I've suggested this to friends of mine who've been seeing the same person for a really long time. I'm like, and like maybe feeling frustrated about whatever kind of progress they're making. I'm like, if you end it, you'll learn something. And also one person can only give you one kind of, relationship, even if it's a therapeutic one. So you can also end a therapeutic relationship and start another one at some point if you want
Right.
to with someone else. And that will give you something else because that person is different and has a different mind and different unconscious, for the transference and like whatever. Like there's so much that you can learn from even just switching.
Right. And you don't have to have like a profound reason to do it.
No, it's going to be just your decision. But going outside of it, so if you're ending analysis and like thinking, I'm ending analysis and I don't want to be in analysis or a therapy situation, I think that is also a therapeutic action because you're like taking out into the world all this work you've done. I was going to say like, it's like you're taking the training wheels off. I don't think that's like the right metaphor, but it's like, you're going to have a trust in yourself or hopefully you can activate a trust in yourself from this work that you've put in to like engage in the world that can feel really scary and out of your control with a sense of knowing yourself and what you want. And to the extent that any of us can do that, having a little bit of like sense of power in yourself to have your boundaries and express your desires and know that those are good and okay. And
I like that phrasing of activating a trust in yourself, right? Because it doesn't surmise that self-trust is something that is necessarily innate, right? But there are ways that we can kind of activate it or we can feed it or we can move toward intention with growing it. And this is a beautiful way to do that, is to say, this has been a really important process for me and I'm done with this process. I think that Connor Habib talks about ending analysis on some of his episodes of Against Everyone with Connor Habib. And I don't remember which episodes those are off the top of my head, but I would encourage the writer to go to that podcast and see if you can find any of that wisdom too.
yeah, I'll hunt them down and link them. And as anyone listening to this podcast knows, we're big fans of Connor. So always sending people to him to learn from him too. But yeah, okay. Well, like the activating trust thing, also like most of us probably, I don't know if I can generalize this way, but speaking from with my own experience and people I know, don't have some sort of like consistent experience of like self-confidence and self-assertion. Like there's moments where you trust in yourself and moments where you doubt yourself, and that stuff can fluctuate. So it's also a matter of like trying to bring that moment and that trust and assertion into situations where you typically maybe haven't felt that way. And this, as you say in your letter, is about ending things. So maybe like let's like come back to analysis and like go into just the like more general ending stuff, because there's so much there too that this person's talking about that really resonates with me.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Shuli. So I am pretty undereducated on, I've heard you talk about like Sylvia Federici and notions around like laboring. And I wonder like your thoughts on the way that we've villainized ending things and how that might be connected to, kind of like dogged and like brutal dependency on progress. And I don't know, that thought just occurred to me that there really is this. I know that we said we're not going to go back to analysis, but I am
No,
thinking about
so
like capitalism and the death drive, right? Like everything we do kind of unconsciously at a level is about death and our own impermanence. so so ending things is a reminder somehow of like things will end, we will die, right? But also just thinking about the maybe even kind of like the puritanical attachment to work and progress and how those things are kind of inherently at odds with choosing an ending.
I mean, there's like this grand theory from like the mid 20th century. I feel like it was Norman O'Brown, The Denial of Death, where he like reads all of European Western culture as like a basically a reaction formation against death. And then, for him, he links death to shit, like also the like fear of excrement that, is part of Western culture and Christian culture too, in particular, I think. So like there's definitely these readings that so much of our culture is built against the facing of our end. And this is also something that Connor and I talked about in our most recent conversation that I put out for the breakup theory. Or maybe it was the one that we did with Dean on his. Anyway, we talked about this a little bit, like how afraid we are to face death. And obviously, like endings are little deaths. Like I talk often about ghosts, right? And like how we live with our ghosts. You're choosing to turn something into a ghost for you, right? It's now you're like transitioning that relationship to something that is no longer present, but something that like exists somewhere in your, menagerie of ghosts. In terms of like capitalism and labor, I mean, there's one thing that like the Western capitalist society is the death drive of like destroying this world and planet and all the life within it, obviously. So that under the name of like life and the search for eternal life, right? Like these Peter Thiel motherfuckers who are like trying to live forever, or that guy who feeds off his son's blood or whatever it is. Like they're like so scared of it, but they're willing to destroy everything. There's this Latin saying, I don't remember, it was like periat mundus, like I'll do like let the world perish, right? And we also like have ideas about how like sort of statecraft functions through necropolitics, that the life of some is generated through the death of many. And there's whole systems of dealing out death, generalized abandonment, as Ruth Wilson Gilmore says. So like we all have kind of different positions within this. When you brought up Federici, I was thinking about the like care work and like feminized labor too, because like historically the proximity to death has often been feminized in ways because it's related to care and ushering someone through that process in terms of death. So that's an interesting perspective to think about, that like I don't know that I've thought about like the kind of gendered aspect of endings before.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily why it came to mind for me. That could just kind of be my own stuff coming up. I've said before on this podcast that part of my draw to having these conversations with you is that I really relate to the writer. I really struggle with endings. I really struggle to initiate endings. I really struggle with, being, broken up with, as an example. And I know that in my own examination of that, there is this core like voidedness around a sense of self, right? Like if somebody rejects me or if I choose to break something off, I really have to come into contact with the parts of me that feel like voided, and I during kind of my darkest hours, I struggle to have a sense of self because it's just kind of like refracted through all these other people. And I think that's also can be quite gendered, not necessarily, but sometimes, especially if you're someone who, like myself, I earn my living off of caring for people through being a psychotherapist and really caring about people's psychic lives. But it just I really relate to this person. And I hope that this person is getting a lot of credit or cheerleading around this decision from their analysts and from others, because it is very frightening to kind of choose to like take one mirror out of the equation, right? This person
Mm.
is the mirror of the unconscious of their analyst out of the equation of kind of self exploration. Like they've internalized it, right? Like it's a self object now, or I would imagine it is. But the continual reflection is going to be ending. And I think that's really, really brave and pretty profound if this person, and they didn't say this, but I imagine if that fear of ending things and abandonment is so strong in them, I mean, that's probably part of being in the analysis in the first place.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that like underlying our fear or like our desire for eternity in terms of relationships is actually like this exaggeration of the actual need underlying it, which I think is the desire for a witness in friend relationships and love relationships that last a long time. One of the things you gain, obviously this isn't everything, but this in terms of like a kind of personal outcome is like someone who has seen you through things and that you can, like you said, it's a mirror so that like you exist, right? That someone has been with you through things, that you've told them things, that you don't have to explain yourself constantly. You have like shorthands to get to the things. Yeah. So like the people that last in our lives for a long time serve that kind of function for us. Not limited to that function, of course, to instrumentalize them, but that's something that we gain out of it. And like when you end something and you imagine like having to retie those relationships with new people, I often feel at least that there's an exhaustion at the idea of like having to explain myself again. And then there's a grief at losing the thing about the relationship you had with a person who you didn't have to do that work with. And so I think what you were saying is like outside of that desire and that I think it's a need, and I think it's something that is beneficial to a lot of us, at least. When you're trying to face that fear of losing that, like it is a need to kind of confront yourself and figure out where you are when you're at home, right? And so many people have a hard time being alone. I have that feeling, and then I realize, oh, I kind of actually love being. I'll do anything to not have to go home alone, like and sit with my thoughts and like leave my friends or go home from my partner's house or whatever. But then on the other hand, I'm like I'm alone. I'm like, there's like a freedom in being alone that no one sees you, that you can do whatever you want, and no one's there to judge you except the damn internal voices. But like, I don't think it's for me. It's not easy to. It's not like I only have one of those feelings. So like, it's very hard for me to leave situations, even when I'm in like a conversation with someone I don't want to be talking to. I like never know how to exit. I'll just like let them keep talking at me until like so someone rescues me until they like wear themselves out. Even if I'm like, oh my god, I want to get out of here.
You want to hear my trick for that?
What?
To just find a moment of pause in the conversation and I say, well, what are you doing for the rest of the day?
Well, that's a good one. I will sit and be like, when is there going to be a pause in this conversation? And then I'm like, there never is. There's never a pause. But then yeah, there's the converse experience of like being home alone and being like, oh God, I wish I was out doing something with other people. There's a whole world out there of like people doing things together and I'm here alone.
It's not, I mean, it's not because I don't love being around other people, but I do think that over time, my growing comfort with endings has allowed me to be with myself in a little bit of a less kind of like distracted, dissociated way.
Yeah.
And I have a so my analyst who I was working with for a little over a year died suddenly in
Oh,
January of 2023. And so that wasn't an ending that I was choosing, right? But there was something kind of interesting that happened where like I became kind of uninterested in my like psychic life for a while after he died. And I think the break was good for me. I wish he was still alive. I was devastated by his loss. And I'm imagining him now and I think that he would laugh. I think he would think that was very funny. Me saying like actually like the break from being curious about myself or kind of like plumbing endlessly into like the depths of my psyche was a good thing. And I'm not saying that this person is going to go in that direction, but like I don't know, like it kind of can be nice just to be like, I mean, I joke about this all the time, but sometimes I'm like, my thoughts are like none of my business, you know?
I love
Like
that.
I don't like that thought. Okay, there goes that one.
Well, yeah.
Um,
To me, that's another big lesson from psychoanalysis is that like the thoughts in your mind are not all things that you have to attach to, and they don't mirror like your whole self. So like you can have really fucked up thoughts come through your head and not have to be like, oh my God, I'm such a terrible person. Just like things go through your head. It's also like the thing you learn in like meditation, right? Or even like with like OCD kind of treatments is like
right.
these thoughts are there and they go through me. And I do think from like a kind of like linguistic point of view too that like thoughts are generated beyond us through the shit we like are reading and that is all the billboards like put on us like just like shit comes through your head. I like this idea too like that you're saying of your reaction after I mean that's such a different kind of ending, right? It's imposed on you, but then it has this therapeutic function. And I often also think about like how I mean there's a whole industry, therapy like social work therapy, but also like self-help and everything of us being concerned with ourselves, so concerned with ourselves and
Mhm.
our and every feeling and every thought and usually through the perspective of something's wrong and we have to fix it, right? Like self-help makes its money off of telling you that like you can fix yourself, right? And therapy is like, oh, all that shit that's really hard for you, like we can fix it for you, or you can fix it for yourself through therapy. And like, what is it like to live without saying, all the thoughts and feelings I'm having are a problem. We can actually relate to them differently, whether it's through saying, that's not mine, it's none of my business, or also being like, like I've had this many years of doing things, and like maybe there's actually some insight and wisdom into my weirdness that is protective and that doesn't hurt me. I mean, obviously, this isn't applicable to everything and everyone, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there's like a culture of kind of this like it's part of the individualist culture, right? To be so focused on our inner problems and failings. And mostly also these problems and failings come out relationally. So
Right.
that's where like a lot of the work is done. It's not like in constant interrogation of yourself. Whenever I've gotten when I've ended therapy and analysis, it's usually because I'm so bored of it. Like I know the story. I know where everything comes from. I understand it. And yet it persists. I can have the most deeply analytical understanding of why and it's still there. So like why am I continuing to do this?
Yeah. I had two thoughts. So one is, I'll often have people say to me, whether they're people I work with or people who I'm just talking to about being a therapist, say like, "Oh, well, I don't want to switch therapists because I don't want to like tell the whole story all over again," you know.
Mhm.
And I understand that, and also you don't have to tell the story the same way, Like I don't know, you just like don't like. I really there is this kind of fixation in our culture currently to like the linearity of trauma or like this is how I was and then this happened and this is how I am now and I need to get back to this. And I don't know. Like, I think that there can just be more creativity around it. And of course, it depends on the kind of provider you're seeing. But I don't know. You get to say, like, I don't actually feel like telling my whole story right now. I had this happen today and I want to talk about this.
It's time for a break. And we're back. There's like an emphasis too on like finding the truth about things. I think that has to do also with how we tell our story, but also sometimes our aim and analysis is to like get to the bottom of things. But really, I mean, this is another lesson I learned from Freud and his idea of Nachträglichkeit, which is like I think it's like retroactivity or deferred action is how Strachey translates it. But it's this idea that like something in the past is like put into place and understood from a later perspective. And like that could be also the distortion of memories from your childhood, but it doesn't matter what actually happened in the end. This is also what he gets to at the end of The Wolfman. It doesn't matter if the primal scene happened, if he really witnessed his parents like fucking, right? What matters is like the story that we tell about it and what that does for us. And so you don't get to the ultimate truth. You come up with a narrative that enables you to function in a way. And that narrative may change. And we know that also from like reading things. There's like all these experiments of like telling the story from different sides or whatever. And so in terms of ending, right? Like this is why it's therapeutic to end a relationship because it creates that narrative closure. And this is something this is like what I wrote my dissertation on. That I was like writing about death and thinking about how the death and the structure of the novel and how death and anticipation of death is we desire it because it creates like a structure of completion that we imagine gives us what I was like interested in thinking is like a feeling of meaning. And so there's like ending things that can sort of answer that desire to have some like meaningfulness or to put a cap on something. But it's just a story, you know? It's a story you tell yourself. And like I don't know, we can relate to that, those like fictional aspects of it as being useful without having to worry so much about what the objective truth is. Okay, but I wanted to also think about some of this more general ending stuff because what I noticed in the letter starts with analysis and then goes more general. And this writer has this kind of binary thinking or relationship to endings, right? That it's like either they say I split endings into two options. Either I don't want it to happen, so I'm being abandoned and feeling horrible and the world is ending, or I do want it to happen, which must mean that the thing that's ending has always been terrible and a bad idea and never had any value. So those are also things I think that people talk about in kind of therapy, right? That there's like this exaggerated that like something, I don't know, it happens even you can flip on things too, be like this thing is the best thing in the world or it's the worst thing in the world. And usually I think that when we do that, we know that obviously that's not true, right? That's like things are more complex than that. And so like finding out why you're feeling those things as this person is trying to do, I think is going to be helpful. And but also just to say that these endings aren't going to be one or the other, right? There's going to be a complex mix of emotions. And a lot of the things that we have to do that's very hard is to face the fact that our emotions aren't simple, that there's so much ambivalence and complexity within them. We can't expect it to just be nice or just hard.
And it sounds like this writer, kind of like already has this wisdom, like they're already kind of grappling with this in the way that I would expect anyone to grapple with choosing an ending to something that has overall been supportive. But there's also, I think, like a really sincere and understandable curiosity about why this binary. And this person can only learn so much about why this binary while remaining in relationship. Endings have to happen. And this is a different kind of ending for them. So they are going to learn about their maybe like attachment, like conscious or not, to this binary, but by initiating this ending.
Right. I mean, functionally, sometimes you do need to use this idea that something's terrible in order to leave it. And I think this is actually true maybe in abusive situations, right? Because a lot of the thing that keeps you in an abusive relationship is your willingness to like nuance it and be like, oh, like this person is actually like, really sweet and kind, but these other bad moments are exceptional and they're working on it or whatever, right? So you might have to be like, no, this is bad and unhealthy and I need to leave it to be able to do that. So I just wanted to add that as a caveat. But yeah, I mean, like the whatever lesson you learn from an abusive relationship can't come until you get out of there. And then you can interrogate it, hopefully also without, and this isn't what the writer is talking about. So maybe I don't need to go in this direction. The next thing that they said though is so they had this kind of binary relationship, but then they're saying, I never had an experience of a separation or ending that felt okay. Like it was okay that something existed, and then it's okay that it's ending. And I think that's interesting to think about that. Like what, like the experience of something being okay. Again, this person's able to like reason through it, but it's a different thing to feel it, you know?
Yeah, I'm not saying this because I think that this is like, I don't know, I'm not like, here's the trick though, right? But we experience endings all the time. And this person more than likely has experienced endings that they register as okay, right? Like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't want to sound ridiculous, right? But like, if you live somewhere where there's a change in season, you know, like the possibility for like that summer comes to a close.
No, I can't
Like,
handle that.
I know that you can't. I was just thinking when I said that, I was like, oh, this is like Shuli's like, this is like the least favorite thing. But, and yet, like you do it every year, you know,
Right.
it isn't necessarily that you feel okay about it, but there is like a certain amount of acceptance that we have to be in that like things do end. And what I'm hearing in this letter is kind of particular to, you know, things that are relational, right? Like even a job that has like is relational in some way. So the fear of being abandoned or rejected, or yeah, those fears are relationally like prescient in a way that it's not when it comes to like the season has changed, and yet that's also an ending.
Right. Again, this is akin, I guess, to the abusive thing. But like what I've been thinking about more politically lately is that how we get trapped into things because of what we think we have in the situation that keeps us from like truly wanting to end it. And I've been thinking about that in terms of political orientation and like desire for action and like how because everything is hard and there's so much precarity that whatever little things we have that we can hold on to feel so important and overblown, even if they're terrible things, right? Like things that we know aren't the actual fulfillment of the true desires, right? Like I'm thinking of like, the comforts that we like the idea like, oh, I can just like lie in bed and watch a movie and this is like I'm comfortable and wrapped in my little cocoon. But like we wouldn't say that's what we want life to be like, right? I'm using that as a kind of silly example, but I think it's true that like the sort of little comforts that industrialized capitalism gives us makes us afraid of the other side of things, like what it would look like on the other side, and we could even know in our heads that acts outside of the end of capitalism and the state would be something that we know will be better. We can't even anticipate it, but our resistance to ending, which is also a resistance to taking the action to make the end possible, is this feeling that like a fear of loss of what we have now, no matter whether we know we don't actually need it or not. And I think that's true for relationships, right? Like even with friendships, like you not just talking about like love relationships and with therapy too. It's like, oh, if I give up the thing that's been helping me or I think has been helping me or have become reliant upon to help me, like then I won't be able to live on the other side of that. And yet like you sort of also know, I think, because you want to end this analysis that the fulfillment in a way is on the other side of ending it.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the fulfillment is on the other side of ending it. and even when endings are in our, quote unquote best interest, there's going to be, well, I don't know. I'm speaking from experience recently over this past year, but I've had some endings, and even though I'm like, this ultimately is what needed to happen for all people involved, I have some sadness, and there's some reflection there that makes me feel tender, and that's that. I don't know. I think I had my kind of own binary experience where I was like, okay, I'm gonna shove this over here. I don't need to really look at this. This was what was needed for everyone. And only recently have I allowed some of the experience of, oh, that is something that was meaningful to me or I treasured in some way and now it's gone.
Yeah, we do a lot to avoid those hard feelings, and like sadness is a big one that we like don't want to. I don't know. I think it's also because it seems unproductive, then it's not valued in our world, and it takes you out of the running of things. I've been reading stuff lately about like the progressive pathologization of grief through the DSM. Like they keep shortening the period of grief that like before it becomes pathological. And so like I think again, we can we can know it's healthy to grieve and yet be like the sadness I must move through it as quickly as possible. And I think I've said this on the podcast before that I'm always trying to learn how to finish my feelings rather than to move through them and like without finishing them. And the other aspect of this for me at least is that often when there's the feeling that's supposedly bad, right, which is like sadness or whatever, causes like alarm bells in my head or in my nerves where I'm like, oh no, something bad is happening and I need to stop that bad thing from happening rather than be like, this thing is bad because it hurts and I don't need to stop it. I maybe just need to feel it and not try to do everything in my life possible to like ignore it and distract myself and disassociate from the feeling. Again, I can say all this and it's like totally adept at practicing this, but it is it's a practice for me, and again to connect it to something I've said previously before. Like one way that I've visualized this to myself is like learning to live with the ghosts rather than to try to exorcise them from the house. Like the ghosts
Yeah.
are going to be there, even if you do pretend you're getting them out of there. They'll haunt you in other ways.
I was just looking back over the letter, and the last full paragraph is, how can I really feel and acknowledge the pain and loss of ending that I'm choosing while simultaneously feeling and acknowledging the excitement and sense of growth that comes with this ending? I don't want to hide from either of those things or let either one eclipse the other. And it feels to me upon reading this letter that this person is doing that. Like even in the question is the practice.
Well, yeah, in a way, they even acknowledge it. Maybe through the process of writing, they're like, "Oh yeah, the writing. Like I wanted to do this through writing a letter and putting it to us as like whatever the addressee is like that was the work. It's again, this is the whole structure of ending analysis, right? It's like it's not reliant upon the body or of the analyst. It's like the end, like your orientation towards the relationship, which involves an ending that creates the understanding. And so this person writing to us, regardless of what we say, knowing that we will answer something has been productive for them or generative for them. But the important thing here too to bring out is like acknowledging the excitement and sense of growth that comes with ending. Because we've been talking about all this negative stuff. Well, I don't know. We've probably said some positive stuff too, but like I just want to emphasize that because one of the things that I've learned from ending is like I don't know, in a way, the ending of even these small things is one of the experiences of freedom that we have. And I don't love that word freedom, and I think it's overblown. But maybe that's why I'm saying it's like minor freedom is like maybe sometimes the best we can get. So there can be excitement to ending things, even though your body and mind is putting up the alarm bells saying this is wrong, you should avoid this, you can't do this, you're gonna be lost or you're gonna need help or whatever. But they're like you can lean into that feeling like of freedom, like and when we end a relationship whatever kind, the freedom in a way is that thing of like, I do not have to account for this anymore. I am accountable to myself, and you can experience that. Just like, what is it going to be like, just like walking through the world being like, I don't have 4 days of analysis to go to. I'm not saving this thought for analysis. I'm
Right.
not collecting material, or I'm not, I don't know, like maybe you also, if you're doing dream oriented psychoanalysis, maybe you like don't have to remember your dreams as much, like be caught up in them. Like there's so much that you can let go that might
Yeah.
alter the daily experience of your life.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I was just thinking about all that time.
Yeah, God, yeah. I mean, wow. Kudos to you. I don't know many people who have done like real classic analysis. It's not offered that much, and it's hard to get to. I've known people who've been able to do it through like training institutes, but like just giving up that time is very hard. So I think it's cool that you were able to have that experience because, wow, I don't know. There's the other thing I was thinking about that I never said about like the history of psychoanalysis, but there's the legendary Lacan's like short session, right? Like to like really like hyper actualize the importance of an ending. He would cut short
Whatever somebody was saying.
session. Yeah, because
Yeah.
he had this idea of like full speech and empty speech, and most of what we say is like empty speech. So he wanted to put the punctuation on it because otherwise you can just like you can talk and talk a bunch of bullshit, right? For me, it's actually in therapy, it's always that I'm intellectualizing everything, which I think poses itself as understanding and like can sound really good and explanatory, but like it's actually a symptom for me to like be so like punctuation, he would do things like, just like open his door slightly and be like to have the session there and then we would close it. He had one famously in a taxi cab, you know,
Um,
had the person and then he like got out of the cab, probably left the cab, left them with the bill.
Well, I don't know if there's much else that I have to say on this, but I'm really glad that this person wrote in.
Oh, I mean, yeah, thank you for sharing this. I think also sharing this with other people is a really it's a gift. Not necessarily that everyone's going through the same situation, but it is another example of one of the daily sort of our like mundane experiences of ending that we have in our lives that isn't like the big stuff. But I also, again, to like connect it to my anarchist stuff, I don't want to separate it, or I don't think it's separate from
Mhm.
that whatever quote unquote big picture, or that I don't think anarchism happens only in the big picture. And so for me, these practices of endings, these practices of facing these fears, a lot of them coming kind of ideologically and culturally, is a practice of how we can reorient ourselves in our relationships and lives.
If you're listening to this and you've been thinking about breaking up with your therapist or your analyst, take this as a sign.
Yeah, try it out. I mean, also, it's like one of those jobs, right? Like if we want to acknowledge that a lot of the problems that we go to solve in therapy are either produced by the family structure, which is like toxic, or through capitalist culture, which is also toxic. The dream is to make those those services obsolete to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
obviously, everyone will always need like emotional, mental support, but like the ultimate things that we're trying to undo, the shit that we carry with us from childhood throughout our lives, is because of the
Yeah.
terribleness of raising a family in a place with no care, no support, no care, privatized care, individualized, atomized, isolated family situations that harms us.
Yeah, you can't self optimize your way out of a system that wants to kill you.
Right. We get band-aids, and it also gives a lot of my friends, some consistent employment, which is also hard to find these days. But yeah, let yourself feel these two things not as a binary, but as like part of the same experience, that needs this ending for you to like move forward and like actually integrate those both of those sides of things. But I also do think right now, feel some of that freedom because, like, I don't know, that's a nice feeling to have, and it can be rare, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Right. If this person wants to let us know how it goes or how it's going in a couple months, I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah, love the ongoing conversation. Sometimes we have people write back to update us, but they're not necessary things to be shared. But also, if you do have ongoing questions or thoughts that you do want us to share, feel free to do that too, because I always think that's sort of generative to have the ongoing conversation that we can share with everyone who listens. Yeah, I don't know. Curious if you like get back in therapy.
Yeah, I would be curious too. Well, thanks, Shuli, for having me on too.
Oh, I love doing these things with you. Yeah, thanks to the writer. Keep writing into us, all of you who want to hear us chat about things from our experience and understandings.
Yeah, and some things.
Yeah, go out and finish something up, end it.
And
You
then
know,
tell us about
yeah, it's good enough. It's good enough. You know, move
it.
on.
Right. All right. Well, thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to The Breakup Theory. Rate, follow, and share us with your exes. Until next time.